You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a bunch of us here, and we got some extra people than we had from part one. As you can tell from the title of the show, we're talking about Rudolf Steiner again. And we got Absidarian Maat joining us. But before we get to him, we'll have the other rejects introduce themselves. Lisa, the Occult Reject, mad scientist, finally joining us for Rudolf Steiner. I know you've been dying to get in on this. What is going on, and how are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And this is a star panel for sure, especially with, Steiner and what have you. And the only thing I have to plug is occultresearchinstitute.org. Check us out.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lisa. I appreciate it. And Ethan Indigo. What is going on, brother? How are you?
Peace on earth. Thanks so much for having me be included with such esteemed group, Absidarian. Can't wait to hear what you have to say. Ethan Indigo on the usual social media, and just dropped an article on Occult Research Institute. And so, yeah, easy to find. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. No, thank you for joining us. And Frater Jin, the ninja. What is going on, Frater? How are you? Please let everybody know what your deal is.
Hello, Cardinal. Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you to Lisa, Ethan, Robby, and Absidarian. And I'm also very. This is a star panel, obviously, for Steiner. I totally agree. And I have a show called Threshold Saints. You can check me out on Twitter or X at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn. IG is at Threshold Saints, and that's also the show account on X Twitter. And I can't remember what my next show is, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. And my show's about metafiction, meta-history, and meta-magic. So if you're interested in that, please check it out.
I think last show you plugged a guy that hit me up that asked to come on. That was just on with you recently. Is that the show? Yeah, was that the one? Did you plug that?
He really wants to. He thinks of himself as he is kind of a magician. I don't know how skilled he is, but he's really interested in magic. And
I thought maybe you could plug that show because I thought you mentioned it in the last one.
He So I just recorded with J. David Osborne. I'm sorry, I totally brain dead. I just recorded with J. David Osborne, who has a brand new book out. He's kind of like the bad boy of alt-lit, so pretty cool. And nice. Obviously he thinks a lot about magic and the way magicians remix reality using fiction. So really cool, dude. Oh no, and he has a great show called Agitator, so people can check that out, which I will be on very soon.
No, I like his style, the way he hit me up. He was straight to the point. So I'm sure it's going to be fun. And the OG himself, Robby Marx. What is going on, sir?
Hey, glad to be here with everybody tonight. I'm R. Marx, or Robby Marx. I do fine art, gig art for bands, festivals, and I would encourage you to check out my wares that I have available. Hit my link tree, which is RMARX, and that'll pull up. You can go to my website, my Etsy, and check out all my art that I do, as well as I have my Meta Mindcast that you can also check out, my podcast. But I'm excited for tonight because Steiner's definitely an interest that I've had for a fairly long time, and I always enjoy just diving into any of his subject matter that he has to offer.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much, Robby. And didn't you, not to brag on your behalf, but didn't you even do authorized artwork for Pink Floyd?
Yeah.
I'd be rocking that every time I had a chance, Robby.
You different names, man. Yeah.
That's my ego. So, but yeah, man, this guy has some great work. Go check it out.
Yeah, if you go to my Instagram, you can check out all the various bands and stuff that I've done artwork for, festivals, international, local, all over the place. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely go check out his stuff. Thank you again, Robby, for being here. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, it's always a good time.
Hell yeah. And last but not least, the man himself, Absidarian Maat. What's going on? How are you? And for all the new listeners, please let everybody know what your deal is again, sir.
Yes, peace, everyone. Thanks for having me on again. I'm Absidarian Maat. You can find me in the Akashic Records in the nonfiction aisle and MySpace. I'm also on Linktree, Absidarian throughout social media networks, Facebook, IG, Twitter, and Gab. And also Patreon. I cover a lot of esoteric research, occult history, health and wellness, occult finance, a wide range of subjects, including spiritual practice and practical applications. So definitely check me out on Linktree, and looking forward to a good show today.
Oh yeah, and I have yours as well as everybody else's notes in the bottom. So I know before the show, I'm just gonna make you repeat it again, but I guess if you want, like, maybe let us know like where you kind of wanted to go with this with Rudolf Steiner. So.
Yeah, sure. So I think it'd be good to just do a quick recap of what we discussed in part one, in case anyone's interested in checking out part one. So in part one, we gave a general overview of anthroposophy. We talked about Steiner's cosmology with the 7 planetary cycles. 7 comes up a lot in his work. We also talk about the 3 poles of Lucifer, Ahriman, and Christ, which is in the center. We briefly touched upon the 8th sphere, which is a really interesting topic. We'll get into that more in depth this podcast. We talked about, was Steiner an incarnation of Aristotle? We discussed the connection between the burning of the Temple of Sisyphus, which was around 356 BC, and the connection to the burning of Steiner's first building, the Goetheanum, in 1923. We briefly talked about biodynamics, agriculture, talked about why Steiner left Theosophy, which is a big turning point in his career. We tried to identify who his master teacher, the M, was, and which led us to Alois Mailander. We also talked about, was Steiner poisoned the year before his death, and a few other things. And in this installment, I'd like to, this is in my notes. I think we'll get to most of it. One topic was Max Heindel influenced by Steiner's work? Some would say Heindel plagiarized his work, but I'm not so sure about that. Another thing we'll talk about is Theodore Reuss, the influence and brief relationship with Steiner. Was Steiner a 10th degree member of the OTO? Was he a member of the Memphis Misraim? We could talk about the difference between 2 kinds of clairvoyance and what Steiner says about atavistic clairvoyance and the 8th sphere and natural clairvoyance. 2 of the most important mysteries that Steiner talks about is the mystery of death, the mystery of evil. Related to 8th sphere, we could also talk about what Steiner says about spiritual beings feeding off humans. I think Goethe is a good topic. Yeah, that's a good topic where he started in his early career. Then we could also talk about the Golden Dawn link with Steiner and New Zealand.
So he's got OTO and Golden Dawn link.
Yes, sir.
Those guys making moves.
Very interesting background there.
So
he was just invited because he was so popular or so profound?
It's a combination of a couple of things. He was definitely a mover and shaker, and he got to know other groups, but not for the reasons most people would think. He was never like a acknowledged Freemason or anything like that, or some of these orders. He wasn't really into secret societies. He wanted much of information to be public, so that adds a different dynamic to him. But yeah, we'll talk about the Golden Dawn link in New Zealand with Falcon. What else? There's 1 second.
So that guy's got like
the prime time of occultism.
Yeah, right. I mean, he was into Theosophy. He was Blavatsky, Crowley, and Golden Dawn. This guy was.
Well, yeah, no, he wasn't really into Crowley, but I understand what you're saying. It's just
or tied to these people. The orders.
Yeah. But there's different. In my understanding, there's different evolutions of the OTO.
Oh yeah.
Before the sex magic and after the sex magic, and things like that. Another important thing about Steiner was his thoughts and his relationship with the Archangel Michael, and why he pronounced it with 3 syllables instead of 2. That's an interesting topic. Yeah, that's some of the things we can cover.
Awesome. I don't know, which one do you? I mean, I guess whichever one you want to start with first. Whichever one I'm more interested in.
Say start at the beginning and let's roll through it.
Yeah, all right, that made sense to me. Actually, it's going to go that way. All right.
All right, so let's. I guess the first one was Max Heindel. This is a really big point of contention in esoteric research and circles. The question whether Heindel was influenced or plagiarized Steiner's work. It's a really interesting topic. You could see in Max Heindel was, he was with the Rosicrucian Fellowship in America. He went to Germany to seek the Rosicrucian elder brothers, to get initiation, and allegedly came back, and that's when he started the Rosicrucian Fellowship. And it's important to note that Steiner and Heindel, they were critical of one another. They wouldn't go so far as like bash each other, but they were definitely critical of each other. So much of his book, The Rosicrucian Cosmo-Conception, you could see some traces in Steiner's work. And then in the Pansoffers website, pansoffers.com, I got to give credit to Sam Robinson, a great website, and he's coming out with the sequel to Alois Mylander's book, at which Steiner will be discussed, and a lot of new things will come to light. But I think the audience would like to hear this. This comes from Sam Robinson and pansoffers.com, giving us a little sneak preview. This is the quote. "It wasn't a rumor in the Heindel circles that Steiner had failed his Rosicrucian test by the elder brother. This is something Heindel actually said of Steiner himself." So Heindel is saying, Steiner failed his test, and that's why they kind of split, and he did his own thing. So I thought that was a really interesting point there. And I think another individual I found really interesting was Theodore Reuss. He was from Germany. I don't know how he was so well connected and how did he get so influential? I always wondered, but he got a lot of charters from England with Yarker. Yarker had a lot of the rights in the 1800s, and he was he's giving out charters. So Theodore Reuss met Steiner, and he's pretty impressed, and Steiner received a charter in 1906 from Theodore Reuss's fringe group, the Masonic Memphis Misraim, right? And he developed a system of 9 degrees based on his Rosicrucian teachings. But his relationship with Reuss was basically a business arrangement, and he was just learning about Masonry and just understanding these old systems and how to bring it to light in the new age. And Steiner became
a little bit about the Memphis. Sorry, how do you pronounce it? Do you know about
Memphis Misraim? Yeah. So it's important to note that it was irregular, right? Meaning it wasn't recognized by official Masonry or the Grand Lodge of England, if that makes sense. So, a lot of there's Masonic bodies or orders that are either irregular, unacknowledged, or even clandestine, which that means they're not really recognized with the official public body of Masonry. So that's important to note. And it seems that Theodore Reuss was just involved with so many irregular groups and very fringe Masonry and different groups and orders. So that's important to note that both Rudolf Steiner and Marie von Sivers, which is his wife, they were admitted in 1905 to OTO by Theodore Reuss. But it was a formal admission into orders without any initiation ceremony. And shortly afterward, we don't know quite the reason yet, but Steiner just stopped interacting with Reuss. I guess he didn't really jive with, what he was doing. He was into, left-hand path, a lot of his associations and group work. So that was an interesting period in Steiner, because when you look at Steiner, he's just known for being Christ-centered. And then you hear he's associated with the OTO, which, sometimes has these not so positive connotations for whatever reasons, with Crowley and, sex magic and the left-hand path and things like that.
Well,
and,
also when you get into the orders of Misraim, that goes all the way back to Egypt in regard to the first building up of the walls to keep in the black silt that would come down the river. It's considered like the first work of physical alchemy. So, there's, as far as some people do look at that as left-hand path when you get into the early Misraim stuff. But yeah, go ahead. Back to, you were talking about, he was more Christ-centered,
Yeah, so, you wouldn't really normally associate him with, OTO and things like that. And I just want to speak on the Misraim group. I'm not sure it goes back to Egypt. It's debatable, because some people trace it back to maybe within 2,000 years in Egypt and the priesthoods. But sometimes, with esoteric orders, there's a historic, there's the history, the traditional history, and the mythological, which is, sure. It's related, with the egregore and whatnot. But definitely interesting topic. So, so that was a very interesting period in Steiner's career, with his relationship with Theodore Reuss. Let's see, what else was there? Yeah, so he was a 10th degree member of the OTO, and he had, the 33rd degree, 90 and 96 of the Memphis Misraim. But, it was just formal. What else? Let's see.
Not to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Didn't Reuss wasn't he also a 33rd degree as well? And
yes. From what I understand, he also irregular, because, I've come to learn, even like Crowley had a 33 degree, but he got it in Mexico, and it wasn't, from what my understanding, I could be wrong, that degree wasn't acknowledged. It was irregular. So it wasn't like, he didn't have the current, the current of the official body of, England. And so I'm pretty sure Theodore Reuss is in the same boat, that he probably did have the 33 degree, but it was irregular, but don't quote me. I could be wrong.
My follow-up question to that, wasn't around that same time when Steiner was, I guess, interacting with Reuss, that Reuss wasn't he involved in starting the Gnostic Catholic section of if I remember, was Steiner involved in any of that? Do you know?
I'm not sure Catholic, but I know it was Gnostic something, a Gnostic
Ecclesia
Christian.
or something.
Sorry. I'm vaguely familiar with that, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah, the EGC and the OTO. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Lisa's totally right. It's like the Ecclesia Gnostica, definitely. You can tell, there's so much Kabbalah with Steiner. Like, you could almost just sit there and interpret it using Kabbalah, and it would make perfect sense. You wouldn't even almost need to read his words. So you can definitely see that there's like a lineage similarity, at least some kernels of the same ideas, even with the Christ. And we talked about this last time, but the Christ consciousness and how that sort of manifests at Tiferet, and you can see other kinds of ideas like going along with this, definitely. And Crowley's like the idea of the beast and where that would rise. That would also arise at Tiferet, and they're all the things are mixed together. And then Nick's friend Jordan said something really interesting. He was talking about the lightning path. So the lightning path is considered the left-hand path, and I agree with this. But it's also a path of synthesis, because you're always supposed to synthesize in the middle. That's where I'm going to call it the upasaka, but the magician is supposed to walk the middle path. But you are drawing from both. So, but it's still considered left-hand path. So I do think that that's interesting, because there is that idea, right, that all magic really is of the left-hand path, which I also agree with. I think that it is like, it's the non-normative rights, right? So it is like the polarity of transgression inherently that doesn't make it evil inherently, because it's all about what you do with it.
I agree, sir.
Well said.
Yeah, I just sent everyone a link on a good article, Kabbalah and Anthroposophy. Yeah, definitely good point. That's a very in-depth article there.
Well, one thing I do want to mention too, just real quick, is I think it's quite obvious that Blavatsky was into Kabbalah. She speaks on it, so again, I think that stuff is in all. My opinion, I think
Masonry. You see it in a lot of the modern Western mystery schools as a whole.
I think even when it comes to the OTO, I think all three Abrahamic religions get played on inside that order. They acknowledge all of them for different reasons, especially in their symbolism and in their degrees, from what I experienced. So there is something up with that, I think. And again, I think I just think like a lot of Gnosticism, like in my opinion, it's kind of like mixing Kabbalah, Hebrew, Catholicism, and a whole bunch of things together. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, that's totally true.
What I was going to say is that during this time, it seemed like everybody was doing, like, they were rubbing elbows together. The people that were starting the OTO, the people that were in Golden Dawn, the people that were, I bet the Marxism branch of, I can't remember, but it all seemed like they were all interacting with each other, kind of starting up their own, chapters, I guess. And so it probably was like the prime time to meet people who, were starting these things and kind of becoming the people that were going to influence esoteric thought at this time. So it makes sense that Steiner would be kind of in all of that. These were the circles. These were the circles. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts.
I think it might.
Yeah, certainly. I think something interesting also to mention related to that is, Steiner was just involved with so much public work, right? With, biodynamics, agriculture, Waldorf schools,
right?
So many different schools. And, Steiner caught a lot of criticism from esoteric orders and, just occultists. But, at the end of the day, he was walking the talk, right? He was putting himself out there. And he was a classic Rosicrucian or Pansophist, which, he was doing service in the world and sharing that spiritual path. So, I got to give him credit and just how much influence he's had in that regard.
He was a Christian Scientist.
Yeah, certainly.
Yes.
So I came to know him.
Sorry, Lisa.
No. That was it. That's how it first came. Or was that he was a Christian Scientist?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and say that what Nick said is totally true. Like, he is a Gnostic because even if he's just a Christian Scientist, like even if he would, no, I'm not saying Christian Science, I'm saying like a wisdom scientist.
Yes.
If he was that, I know Lisa knows exactly what I'm talking about, and Robby always. But he's involved in a noetic process. Yes. So just by that fact, he's a Gnostic. It's just that we have lost that even meaning of what a Gnostic is.
Yes.
I mean, I would even look at the way that the OTOs even designed, or the way that Crowley, even in his own work, would look at stuff, makes it Gnostic in a sense as well, even though it's Thelemic.
No, it's Gnostic too. Yeah. I would totally consider the OTO like a Gnostic. It's just a version.
I mean, they have the
that's what even Lisa was talking about. Yeah, they're all mixing up. They're all like, even the article that Absidarian just sent, like, I'm a fast reader, but I didn't read the whole thing, but I skimmed it. And so I don't even agree with some of the Kabbalistic associations on that manuscript. I don't know if Steiner said that or not, or if that's just an interpretation, but that's the same thing. It's like different people have different preferences on the tree, different terminuses for their ideology. And if you're really good, I'm not saying I'm that good, but sometimes I'm that good. You can trace it a little bit on the tree, and you can say, oh, okay, this is where Islam prefers, or this kind of Islam, or this kind of Judaism, or this kind of Christianity. So I think it's all possible. It's just like how you it's how good your original understanding is, and then seeing, okay, this person made a mistake, or what I would call a mistake here and there, and they, you know, took a wrong turn maybe on this path. So
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. So I also want to bring up the connection with, you know, with the points made that, you know, the Gnostic thought. Part of Steiner's legacy is known by his students and researchers is that he strived for a redemption of thinking. So, you know, clear thinking and that thought process, which is the Eastern counterpart of Jnana, which is, you know, knowledge of, you know, mind-based, mind-centered versus bhakti, which is, you know, heart-centered. So, yes, Steiner, you know, he's a very lofty thinker. Anyone that reads his books, you know, he's definitely has some of his ideas are really out there. So, definitely a redemption of thinking was one of the major themes throughout his life. And he had a interesting relationship with the Archangel Michael. And when I first came across this, I was like, wow, he pronounces, you know, Archangel, you know, with 3 syllables. Have you guys come across
Michael,
you know, pronouncing with 3 syllables instead of 2? I thought that was interesting.
I've heard of it, but not necessarily know why there would be that.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I've come across it in a few different cases. You know, when I say it, I don't even know why, but after the cumulative years, I say Michael.
Yeah,
That's
I do
just
too.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think it has to do with the vowels, the 3 vowels in there.
Right.
I, A, and E. You know.
For me, though, it could be actually, though, from pronouncing it like that due to ritual work.
Yeah.
Because that's how it's pronounced, like, in, you know, times that I've used it in rituals. So I could see maybe I picked it up that way, but yeah.
It's probably the original pronunciation as well that got diluted throughout time.
Yeah.
But I found it interesting, you know, if you know Rudolf Steiner, he's always known as a calm, centered person, you know, never agitated. But you know, come across some of his biographies, this author only knew Rudolf Steiner to be angry, really angry once. And this is when he heard someone mispronounce Michael's name. This was the only time throughout this career that in his relationship with Steiner that he saw Rudolf Steiner get mad. I thought that was an interesting story.
Fascinating.
I would also say, like, when you look at the archangels, when you pronounce their names, Uriel or Gabriel or Raphael, everyone emphasizes the El at the end. Yet with Michael, it's just all together. And so it's almost he was emphasizing the El at the end of as El meaning something symbolic, as it did with the other angels. I don't know. That's kind of how I always took it when I heard him.
Yeah.
No, that's an incredible point. I was going to write it even in the chat, Lisa, but no, incredible point. I agree with that, because I think that really, if you are understanding like the higher order Kabbalistic thinking, like maybe some of the older texts like Ramek, he's talking about the hosts, especially the archangels, because they're relatively low in that. We've talked about this on the show many times, but they're kind of low in the angelic hierarchy. So it's really about how they're an expression of the El, the many, or the Elohim. So but it's really a Hesed. So it's like it's what happens when you reflect something in the ocean. It looks like many things, right? But it's really just one thing. So exactly. And so, that's what I think it is. So he's emphasizing that it's really like these are particles maybe of God. Maybe that's more of a Steiner way to describe it. Yeah. Particles of light that are like within a name.
That are trapped in some egregoric form.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I do. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I also see an element of letter mysticism, because, you know, if you write out the name Michael or Michael, it's, you know, three vowels. It all goes back to the vowels, the power of vowels. So there's the I, A, and E. And, you know, when you say Michael, it's really, you're just like saying 2 vowels. So I think Michael, you break it down to its original root language, you know, in the East, in Hinduism, it's Bij, you know, the seed. So I think the vowels, you know, that really speaks a lot to the power and effect.
Oh yeah.
So related to his relationship with the Archangel Michael and how much he speaks about how important this Archangel is. This is really interesting. He called for the laying of the foundation of a Michael festival during the September equinox to balance or add balance to the Easter equinox, which glorified Christ in the spring equinox. So he wanted to, add a September equinox, which was dedicated to the Archangel Michael. And, some anthroposophy students and other groups do, celebrate, Michael. And if I remember correctly, maybe the feast of Saint Michael is around the same time, but I'm not sure. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. Around the world, are there any festivals you guys draw connections with the autumn festival celebrating, the fall?
The Catholic Church has the three archangels on the 21st, but they used to actually be more. So that is the one interesting point about that. It used to actually be a considerable amount of angels, especially in the medieval period. They used to have a scroll or something that they would read off all the names, and then they kept condensing it. So, but now everybody just shares that one feast day. And then there's 2 archangel days for the Orthodox Church. And one of them is interestingly shared with Saint Cyprian of Antioch. So,
Saint Michael's feast day, also known as Michaelimus, is celebrated on September 29th.
Yeah, I just checked that out. 9/28. Some do 9/28. Some do 9/29. But maybe it's between the lunar cycle there.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Robby.
I think it was associated with his apparition, wasn't it, Robby? The 29th.
Holy Feast. Yeah, I'm not sure just what I have in front of me.
It does seem to be the least celebrated of the equinoxes and solstices.
Yeah.
There's more saint festivals in the fall period and the fall and winter period, like that September through December period, than there are in most of the other equinoxes. The only other time that I think is really important is like St. John the Baptist Day, Mary Magdalene Day. All of those things fall around like the summer equinox.
Right.
Or the summer solstice, excuse me.
There's also the summer fire festivals of the Germanics as well.
There's also a Japanese summer festival where they celebrate like the North Star or something.
And also in the Greek mysteries, you have the Eleusinian rites, which is in the fall, with the harvest and the corn. It's a really interesting history, occult history there. Okay. So I think, Rob, you wanted to talk about the sevenfold human body, with the etheric body, physical, etheric, astral, ego, spirit self, life, spirit, spirit man. You want to go ahead?
Oh, it's just interesting how he talks in regard to basically the descent into matter and how these different bodies, being the astral and the etheric, settle into the physical body. And I thought that one of the really interesting things that he talks about is that we're at the point in regard to sinking further into matter that we know we are becoming controlled by the matter around us because we are hardening into such a physical state with matter itself. I thought that was a very interesting concept. But yeah, go ahead with the different body fold.
Yeah, sure. So wait, let me just bring up his 7 bodies. And his, 7 is a big number in his cosmology, and he definitely has a sevenfold human structure with the physical body, etheric body, astral body, ego or the I, and a lot of this corresponds with his planetary cosmology. The 4 stages so far were old Saturn, old sun, old moon, and now we're at the Earth phase, 4 out of 7.
Yes.
The next is Jupiter. Then, if I remember correctly, it's Venus, then Vulcan. So the physical body relates to Saturn and the physical world. The etheric body is the vegetable kingdom,
Right.
and also old sun. Astral body, with water, emotions, feeling. It's also the animal kingdom and the lunar body, old moon. Right. And what makes human the crown jewel of creation is the ego or the I, which is the conscious individual force. And there's this mistaken belief in the New Age that you have to destroy your ego, which I think it's a gross misunderstanding. You have to transmute your ego. But why would you want to destroy your I, your center of your will and self-awareness? So I think it's just a little diluted teaching there with that.
And I think it's also interesting how he breaks down like the 7 seals, and basically when the 7 seals open, that we'll be remembering our past 7 lives, and there's like this inherent soul memory that is bringing us towards this evolution like function that is the entire system, and that those 7 books opening are basically like the book of life, and it's the process of the soul like purifying and graduating into higher forms of consciousness and being.
Yeah, certainly. And I don't know if you guys have read in his writings, he mentions that in the future we won't reproduce with our reproductive organs anymore. That's evolving further up the body. So it's gonna be with your larynx or your vocal cords. So that's really, and it goes back to the word, right? The word, the creative word.
And I like how he has this idea that after the war of all against all, that essentially that we will know each other just by looking at one another, because we will see the pure essence and form of each other in regard to the higher evolutionary states. But I also find it interesting as far as the sinking into matter, how he says that the Atlanteans were the first ones that had bones as far as coming into true human form. So it's almost like this very Eastern idea of, that you see in Hinduism and other forms of sinking into matter, coming into that lowest point, and then evolving out of the matter back into. So there's, as far as the elements that he's bringing and tying, and this idea of Saturn and the sun and the moon are very Chaldean in regard to their oracle systems. So you just see him tying so many ideas into this cohesive thing that when you really get into it just makes too much sense.
Yeah, certainly. Good point. I think we should talk about the incarnations that he speaks about. That's a really interesting subject. So he's talked about, the 3 poles, Lucifer, Ahriman, and Christ. So this is just a quick quote to catch people up to speed. The dark or shadowy energy manifests in 2 forces, Lucifer and Ahriman. Lucifer is the fluidic warmth that unifies the nature of religion. Ahriman is the rigid coldness that differentiates the material nature of science. Too much Luciferian influence brings fanaticism, and too much Ahrimanic influence brings delusion and materialism. The contrast between them enables man to perceive a third reality, the Christ force, without which there's no progression. The world, therefore, is balanced, as it were, on a 3-legged stool. So I thought that was a cool quote.
It's beautiful.
It does remind. Sorry.
Please go ahead.
I just want to say it does remind me of Rahu and Ketu. Like that's when I did my own episode on a similar subject. That's what it reminded me of then. It reminds me of that now when you're saying it, Absidarian, very much. Like Rahu is the materiality. That's why he's the most dualistic of the grahas. Ketu is the false guru. He's like the false illumination. You think that he presents like this spiritual liberation, but it's actually just as false as the material one. So, and that would correspond to Rahu being like a material agent, and Ketu is a subtle agent, meaning his body's made of smoke. Yeah, I just think that's really interesting.
That is a good connection with Rahu and Ketu for sure. I definitely see it. So
I was just thinking about the Trinity, the value of the Trinity in bringing that balance with the two sides, and then the third part bringing that balance.
Well, thanks, boss, for bringing the Tonka up. I just thought when Robby was talking about like the speech and Absidarian was talking about the word, this is basically what that discussion was. That was the meaning of this. This is Hayagriva. So it's a little different. I'm sure Absidarian is familiar with the Vishnu's avatar Hayagriva. This is the Buddhist Hayagriva. Mm-hmm. So he wears the green horses on his crown. Those speak the primordial word into reality. But first, he has to have the breath. So the breath is really expressed in his consort. So she is also considered to be sow-faced, even though she's not necessarily depicted as that in this image. But she is the primordial sound. So she is like how the four elements, like Yahweh Vave, captures in the fifth. The fifth is like the expression of the sound, the gross sound, we'll say. So like what sounds like maybe at the phoneme level. But when he takes it in, he can express it as the word. And so it sounds like a horse's neigh. That's how it's described in the text. But because it pierces the subtle reality as well, there's something like vibratory, magical about it. And you can't see in this image, but he's actually standing on a sun disk, implying like maybe he's at Tiferet. And he's also standing on a dragon, interestingly enough. Many dragons, 12 dragon kings, in fact.
Wasn't Michael the sun associated with the sun as well?
Yeah, totally.
Yes, 100%. The solar being, yeah.
And Steiner does get into the solar energies, the beings on the sun, one being the Christ that does come down into human form, and the other being a sort of a sun demon that is the oppositional force of the Christ.
Sorath, right?
Yes, Sorath. There you go.
Very indirect in his writings. Much of what we know about Sorath is from researchers or his students. He doesn't really speak directly about that. Am I correct?
Yeah, he doesn't.
Okay, yeah.
He just says the name.
But he does speak about a few incarnations we should talk about. So let's just start off with, he talks about Lucifer incarnating in China around 3000 BC. He talks about Shiva in Hinduism being an incarnation of Lucifer. Of course, he talks about the Christ incarnation. He talks about the return of Christ, which is not a physical incarnation, but an etheric incarnation.
Right.
And then he talks about upcoming Ahriman incarnation, that's linked with transhumanism and just rampant materialism, and people forget about their spiritual connections.
Right.
But he also talks about the Maitreya Buddha, which I think is just so interesting. When he gets into that, that's like, and he says a great quote. I'm gonna find it, but you guys know about the Maitreya Buddha?
No.
The next prophesized Buddha,
right?
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. The full incarnation. Yeah.
It can also be considered an incarnation in the Nirmankaya body or the worldly body. So it can just be like a something of consciousness,
like
meaning that
consciousness.
Yeah, kind of. Except in Buddhism, it's all about praxis. Like Buddhism's like if you like it's all about like you have to meditate every single day. You have to do your mantra japa every single day. Like there's no half measure. If you're doing it, then you're accomplishing. If you're not doing it, then there's nothing. So if you want to like bring Maitreya into the world, if that's what your orientation is, then you have to be doing those practices that would accomplish that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you may have said this already, Absidarian, but so when he's referring to Lucifer, he's referring to enlightenment, correct? Like the bringer of knowledge, the lightening of knowledge, or no?
No, it's related. Some Gnostic interpretations, connect the Sophia with the Lucifer impulse, but there's a differentiation there's a differentiation in Steiner's cosmology. From what I understand, Sophia is the feminine embodiment of wisdom, and that's why it's anthroposophia. It's glorifying the understanding Sophia in the human body. Anthro is human, Sophia is the body of knowledge. Lucifer in his cosmology is retarded light, so it's too much light without action, so it's just overthinking, delusions and just things like that.
I kind of get the understanding that it's blackness that is like basically void and nothingness that is actually pulling and sucking light out.
Yes, and holding humans back from evolution. So this is part of his cosmology from Lemuria, which was before Atlantis. He connects that with Luciferic beings, which are retarded in moon evolution. So it's the old moon cycle in his cosmology. For Atlantis, it's the fire spirits that are holding humans back of Ahriman, which is retarded in sun evolution. So these are spirits that are held back throughout the cosmological times. And the present is Asuras, which are retarded in Saturn evolution, spirits of the most powerful egotism. So you see these cycles coming back, right? We start with the phase of old moon, old sun, and now, Earth. Oh, I forgot Saturn. But throughout these cycles, there's, spirits that, help progress and evolve humanity. And as on the counterpart, there's spirits that retard our development. And it's like the tree of life and the negative tree of life, the Clipperoth,
Yeah.
So it's similar to that. It's an interesting topic. And
so that would be part of his dualism then.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And whenever I hear about the formation of his body theory and the planets, it's almost like a tree of life description in the emanation, fabrication, or excuse me, how am I missing this? Emanation, fabrication, formation. What are the four dimensions? Excuse me, but it goes from the more and more subtle to the more and more gross in either a positive way or in relation to the spiritual archontic spookiness that the Gnostics were so afraid of too. It's almost like that negative formation from the more subtle to the more gross as well.
That's a great point, Ethan. And I want to riff off Lisa's comment and say, like, so that was my point about Sorath that I was kind of holding. But before we keep going, I'll just say it is that's how I think of it, is like Christ rises into Tiferet, but then it's obviously more than that. But then his consciousness rises into Dath. Well, what is Dath? Dath is kind of like the carnal ground, or dead, at least you could say. So it falls into the Klippa. And that's even how some Catholics, seemingly Opus Dei, and maybe some of the others, do consider it like that. Like he's like a cork holding down the hosts of the abyss, I guess.
I even think before, when you were talking about Lucifer, I guess in his sense, it was very Kabbalistic to me. I thought, like, the idea of it. Even on the seventh sphere, you have a female image, but then yet Lucifer is still associated with that. And it shoots the rainbow, which is light, just colored light, over to the eighth sphere. So it's very like Luciferic in a sense, anyway, to me, that way, Kabbalistically.
You're totally right, Nick. Even in Tantra, like the Rahu's always in front of Venus. That's how it's described. And Ketu's always in front of Mercury. So you would have those two colors, which in Kabbalah you could describe as like maybe the green, a peridot green, like that sickly green, and that like kind of like sickly orange, that like very like bright orange. You could describe that as being his colors, and him in like a figure 8 formation, if you're thinking about it like on the tree. And he's like swimming between the two constantly, head and tail. So I totally agree with that. And there's a definite relationship between Rahu and like Venus, and even like that path, like the 7th star card, obviously, and like the, like the falling star, and then she rides the dragon. Sometimes she gives birth to the dragon. Sometimes she tames the dragon. It depends on the, I guess, turning of the aeon. But yeah, I totally agree.
As an off-color comment, that the whole fall of Lucifer getting mad because of Adam makes more sense if Lucifer's a girl. Like it totally just, it all adds up.
Yeah. Lisa's hitting it. Yeah, for
It's
sure.
funny.
Yeah,
Only a chick can stir up that much shit.
With Venus, for sure.
Yeah,
And then,
Lucy.
in Steiner's writings, he talks about there's an occult blind between Venus and Mercury. So what I take from that is, sometimes it's interchangeable. Lucifer's known as Venus, the morning star, and sometimes it's feminine attributes.
Yes.
And adds an interesting dynamic. Mercury brings knowledge too, right? Because he has the wings on his. He's the god of commerce and trade. So very interchangeable, and the similar symbols too, right? Just the lunar symbol above Mercury for travel. So I always thought that was an interesting connection.
Steiner, he also talks about that at a certain point, when you go back far enough, that Venus was always labeled as Mercury, and Mercury was always labeled as Venus. So when you get into a lot of these ancient alchemical writings and stuff, this was a common perception in the way that they labeled things. That probably, if you had the eyes to see and the ears to hear, that you knew that they were interchangeable.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Yeah, different directionalities dependent on text.
Yeah, that was
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that was even another thing too that I forgot to mention when I was talking about like Kabbalistic, for me, influences. Even if you left the clip off out of it, you still have the vices and the virtues on every sphere. So you still have the duality
100%.
there. You know what I'm saying? So it's very Kabbalistic, I think.
Yeah, you don't even need the klipa, in my opinion. We've talked about this a million times on Story Nick, but I agree. You have both. It's inherent to the tree already. But the idea of what Lisa said really caught my attention, because that is obviously like that formation at Yesod, like would be the Aisha at Sunanim, or the princess of the klipas. But again, because she's like a mind-born daughter, it's just an idea. It's not that the klipas are real. It's just that they're an idea.
Well, that's probably all it is an idea.
But it would go perfect with the Steiner dualism of Sophia and Lucifer. You know what I mean? It's like the same.
Absolutely.
Two sides of the same coin, almost.
Yeah, many expressions. Like Lucifer, he can be more singular maybe than the Sophia, but there's a point where maybe she has also many expressions like that are fully her. That's also very like, as you know, Lisa, like a very Gnostic idea. Some of the texts like say that, like, yeah, she can take this incarnation, one of them Zoe, like the daughter of life force. Obviously there's Nuria, daughter of knowledge. Then there's Seth, the adamantine son. So I think it all fits. And I think it's all like, they're talking about the same, he's talking about the same thing, but he kind of recontextualizes it for his own cosmology.
Right.
I mean,
he definitely does that.
Again, that's even very Kabbalistic or even tarot. When you're looking at the story, it's just like two, male and female, just changing forms and going up the tree or down the tree together. Even the characters that are used, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you're just seeing that male and female finally, and in tarot. Interesting. Sorry. All right. Next. Okay, go ahead.
Right. So I just want to tie in the Gnostic connections. While Steiner doesn't talk about like the archons, he does talk about the eighth sphere and spiritual beings that feed off humans. I just wanted to share this interesting quote. This is from Steiner. There are beings in the spiritual realms for whom anxiety and fear emanating from human beings offer welcome food. When humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. People not yet sufficiently convinced of this statement could understand it to be meant comparatively only. But for those who are familiar with this phenomenon, it is a reality. If fear and anxiety radiates from people and they break out in a panic, then these creatures find welcome nutrition and they become more and more powerful. These beings are hostile towards humanity. Everything that feeds on negative feelings, on anxiety, fear, and superstition, despair, and doubt are in reality hostile forces and supersensible worlds, launching cruel attacks on human beings while they're being fed. And then he goes on, the solution, to that and everything. But I thought that was really interesting, how he talks about, these energy vampires, this loosh harvesting related to the eighth sphere. Right. And this ties into what he says about clairvoyance and his warning against atavistic clairvoyance. So just to catch everyone up to speed, atavistic is it relates or is characterized by reversion to something ancient or ancestral, a reversion, return to a previous state, practice, or belief, even a regression, returning to a previous state, or a decline from a higher level. So some examples of atavistic clairvoyance is the tarot cards, divination, psychedelic drugs, or any tools that you use that are outside of yourself and your center. And to counter that, he talks about, basically, he doesn't use the term, but I'm going to use natural clairvoyance, which is, just operating from your center. It's sober-minded, and it's definitely superior and far different from atavistic clairvoyance, because with atavistic clairvoyance, it's sleepy, it's cloudy, and you could be affected by, negative beings that are, manipulating you and giving you the answer you want, or, with divination that may not be, fully true. So he warns against a lot of, out-of-body experiences like astral projection. It's a similar related to Gnostic or New Age belief that the body is a prison that one needs to escape, which I disagree with. And this ties into, Alois Mylander's teachings of, full body consciousness, and we're here to transmute the body, not to escape it. Right. So it's really interesting counter teachings of what's popular in the mainstream.
That is a very Buddhist idea too.
Yeah.
That you can cultivate it in this body, this life.
Yeah.
Did he
rather
use...
than...
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Please go ahead there.
No, finish, please.
No, that's all. That's legit all. I want to hear what you have to say.
I just want to ask a silly question. Did he use that word loosh specifically?
No, he did not. That's me. That's my. He just used food, and that's my.
That matches Sophia in fucking Hebrew. I was like, oh, what the fuck is the hell to that?
Say that again.
That matches Sophia in Hebrew. That's what I was like. Well,
oh yeah, Gematria.
Yeah, you were just talking about it.
And it seems like a lot of that is exoteric, in other words, outside of ourselves, tools outside of ourselves that, of course, is not as effective towards intuition, right? Inward learning, as just being centered and so forth. That's a great contrast. Thanks for presenting that.
Yeah, certainly. And I've had experience with Ouija boards and stuff, younger, growing up, and spirits, they pretend to be, family members, whoever, they tap into your energy fields.
They're tricky.
And, channeling can be dangerous because of parasitic entities pretending to be other beings and feeding off your energy and attention. So it can undermine your individual will and spiritual progress as well. So I'm not really into divination. I like the tarot for symbolism. I love it. Like breaking down the symbols and the archetypes. Beautiful. I love that. I love understanding astrology for the as within, as without. So the correspondence to, your organs and the inner workings of your different bodies. Definitely interesting. So it's all how you use it.
Maybe the more grounded one is, the more these tools can be effective too, right?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that's, you said it.
One of the things I find interesting that he talked about was the idea that the animals that had evolved within this realm were basically sort of devices that shaped the evolution of humanity, and that these animals, from the lions to the horses, depending on the religious, cult that is evolving, they kind of use these animal totems as devices for purification and acceleration of the soul force. And he says we basically, through time, we're like shedding these animal forces as we move up in the strata and become more purified.
I was gonna interject, Robbie. You like perfect. You like set it on cue. What Ethan said about exotericism, and then the energy fields and how you find this intuition. I'll call it, but this clairvoyance outside of yourself. And then when you talked about the animals, he was the first person to talk about integrated farming and biodynamic agriculture.
Right. Very much.
You're putting everything very cyclical. And when you're in this cyclical type of closed system, he talked about composting, you are regenerating this energy field within the soil. And, I've been corrected in school that it's not dirt, it's called soil, because soil, like the soul, has bodies in it. It has life in it. It's alive, and it provides all of the nutrient bases for everything that grows out of it. And so when you're, sticking your hands into the soil engine, this, that you get a lot of serotonin and dopamine effects, and the bacteria in it also feeds into your gut, and it helps you with clarity. It helps you with all kinds of intuition. And so it's like this, you're sticking your fingers into the energy field of the earth and becoming very aware of everything. So that everything me of that.
Oh yeah.
Wonderful.
Beautiful, Lisa.
Talk about grounding, right? Just get in there.
That's me.
Yeah, exactly.
Nick's texting me, and my feet are always like literally almost up to my knees in mud. And he's like, "Oh, you're coming on? You good, boss?"
Oh yeah, last time I think you told me you're gardening or some shit, right? You're like,
I was planting box.
Yeah, something like that.
Nice.
Yeah, I like hearing that as a reason for being late, though. That's great. Good. All right, so on to the next one. Absidarian. Or Robbie, I don't know. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on too with all the stuff you got?
I've just kind of been weaving it all in.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot. Just making sure. All right. I guess Absidarian.
Yeah, certainly. So I just want to touch upon, Steiner speaks a lot about the mystery of death. So I'm going to share this really interesting quote related to that. It's based on knowledge of the spiritual world can only be acquired on earth. This is his quote. The fact that the dead live in the spiritual world does not necessarily give them knowledge of the world, although they can see it. The knowledge which can be acquired through spiritual science can only be acquired on earth. It cannot be acquired in the spiritual world. If therefore the beings in the spiritual world are to possess it too, they can only gain it from beings still on the earth. That is an important secret in the spiritual worlds. We may live in them and be able to perceive them, but the necessary knowledge concerning these worlds can only be acquired on earth. That adds such a dynamic about the mystery of death and what you're learning while you're alive and what you take with you. And, it ties into, the beings using humans as spiritual food. And you look around the world and you see what's going on. And you're like, wow, this is just like some big loosh farm, right? It feels like it.
So does that mean that the dead know more about life than we do?
I think it's the opposite. I think it's what he's saying is the living with spiritual practice, they could know more about spiritual worlds than spiritual beings that are amnesic, in limbo or whatever. It sounds like, when some spirits die, they don't know, like they're going through,
like a residual haunting where they're stuck in a loop.
Yeah. The shells, the shells of
the NPCs are ghosts.
Yep, NPC ghosts.
Yeah. You also consistently see through all the histories that the dead, they are longing for nutrition from life. This is in some cases longing for blood. This is the idea of a spill for the homies in regard to feeding, giving drinks. You see the burning of the money, the things that kings and emperors have tried to take with them into the afterlife. So there's always this longing for the burning that is the living,
And like with the archons, there's almost this jealousy towards the living too, right? They almost are not only averse to us, but they don't like our music.
Malfeasance. They don't. Yeah, they have a grudge against us.
Seems like the way they explain it often enough.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think we covered a lot. Is there any questions or anybody want to add to anything we discussed?
I had a quick question, just if you want to expand on it a little bit. There was some mystery of Golgotha that Steiner spoke about.
Oh yeah.
I don't quite remember exactly how he said it, but it was something about that it was the turning point or something with human spirituality, I think.
It's the sinking down into matter and the barbarism of the old world, coming from the Atlanteans into the flood. That it was basically at the point when the Christ came down and he pierced the veil, like opening this passage for everyone to ascend, that we're kind of moving again back on the upswing. And the whole Golgotha, is this idea of Noah taking the body of Adam, bringing it to Salem. And then, the old books talk about the earth opened up and subsumed the corpse of Adam and basically took him into the inner earth. And that is at Golgotha, the place of the skull. Golgotha is the place of the skull. And essentially that's where this altar of Adam was. It's where the altar of Abraham was. It's where Christ was crucified.
Was it where David defeated Goliath as well? Or?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure on that one, but basically the Golgotha is the mystery of the skull, Adam's skull, that is this foundation point of humanity, that where the Christ was crucified and opened that passage for everyone to be able to, kind of almost like a bodhisattva in a sense, opening the passage and helping everyone along the way, and then he'll be the last one to ascend.
So yes, I'd like to add a few things on the mystery of Golgotha.
Yeah.
So throughout Rudolf Steiner's writings and work, there's a central theme, and he drives this point across a few times. In his life work, the most important event in human history was the mystery of Golgotha, the crucifixion. It was the center point of creation. In his work, and this is two quotes I'll share with you. I beg you to see this in the right light and to combine it with the feeling about what happened through the mystery of Golgotha, in which his actual sacrifice consisted, namely in leaving the spiritual spheres in order to live with the earth and the human beings on the earth, and to consolidate the impulse he gave for further human evolution on earth. And then another time he says, the significance of the mystery of Golgotha, the life of Jesus Christ, cannot be fully grasped without the knowledge that rather less than 3,000 years previously, there had been the incarnation of Lucifer. So you see this polarity, light and darkness, even though Lucifer is, associated with this light, some say the false light. So he speaks about this throughout his work, and Christ is at the center point of his work. That's why he left Theosophy, right? Theosophy, they were trying to prop up Jiddu, Krishnamurti, to be the next world savior, and they weren't really rocking with the Christ impulse. They were more, with the Lucifer impulse. They wanted more on an Eastern perspective. And then they tried to bring that to the West with, the lingo and repackaged teachings of certain things.
Well, it is interesting because I would argue that the Jiddu Krishnamurti was like, how they've described it is from the Indian Theosophical Societies. He's like a Krishna consciousness. Right. Krishna consciousness actually comes from Binah. So it's very Saturnian in nature, and whereas Christ consciousness obviously comes from a different sufferer. So it has like there's actually a totally different connotation, and it's sort of a different, you use bhakti, like that devotional love, to open up in Kabbalah it would be Netzach, but then it's the Netzach Binah connection. So you would open those up with Bhakti, but the idea of Saturn specifically is a densifying of your karma, a densifying of the obstacles in your life. And that's why what a lot of people who do, I'm forgetting the cult name. I apologize. I shouldn't call it a cult, but there's like the Krishna people, the Hare Krishnas. Okay. So
Hare Krishnas, yeah.
Yeah, so they people who often join that, and this is a tantric thing as well, is like if you worship Krishna, your life will actually be more difficult because that's what his job is to make your karma more densified, so you'll pass through it in a shorter time. Sorry, I just wanted to add that really quick.
Thank you. All right, continue.
That's interesting perspective. Because when I'm out in the summer, I see the Hare Krishnas frequently at the festivals, pushing their little books. You know.
I mean, definitely that has MI6 and CIA, right? Origins and because all things theosophy do, and whether that's good or bad, I don't know. I'm not making a judgment on it, but I just think they definitely pushed that ideology to be like the one world religion. And, you know, there's still Krishna. There's a lot of Krishna Bhakti cults. Like when people say the word Hinduism, that's really what they're talking about, because that's the majority of people who say they're Hindu, quote unquote, air quotes.
And I think it is still considered, because of its age, I think it is still considered as a cult. So I don't think you're wrong in calling it a cult.
I just realized now, I guess this maturity, that sometimes that people will use a system just because I don't agree with it. They might find that use and so I can't really judge them too harshly unless it's totally sicko, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered a lot, gang. I think that's it for some of my notes.
Okay.
That was Maat, Absidarian. That was a great breakdown.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Was there anything else that any of you, Lisa, Friday, Jen, Robby Marx, wanted to say?
Go ahead, Lisa.
No, Robby, please go.
I was just going to say that I think, it's very interesting, just the various ties that you see. It's very Rosicrucian, and that he's taking many philosophies and kind of bringing them into a holistic system. And this idea of conscious fractaline evolution based around the philosophies of the root races, going back into theosophy. And I enjoy reading about it. I think when you really get into it, it does make a lot of sense. But again, from a philosophical standpoint, you have to take everything as true while believing none of it. It's kind of a system of explaining a lot of things that we can have no other way of beginning to conceive of how to understand, And I think it's great for that.
Thank you. There was something I was going to say and I totally forgot now. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I'll just say alternatively, how great was his teachings that he brought about the Waldorf school and the and all the nutrition and so forth. So he's got both those dynamics, as you beautifully said, Robby, that he explains the unexplainable.
And it's very holistic in regard to just the natural turnings and the understandings of the forces that we live in, which is why it is so widely accepted in so many different values within society,
I'm going to go a little transgressive and say that I disagree with his interpretation on the human sexuality in terms of sex, but I think he was a proponent of relative truth, meaning that a lot of what he said was actually true and was actually you can interpret it. Maybe his conclusions weren't 100%. I don't agree, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, I get that.
And the point, Ethan, about sorry, Nick.
No, I was agreeing with you.
He does constantly stress that it's not necessarily about what it is, but it's the most important that the human mind should think in ways of higher being and higher understanding. So it's in that sense, I think it's a beautiful kind of philosophy. Even though, like you were saying, I don't necessarily agree with all of it. But yeah, a relative truth is a good thing,
Beautifully said, Robby. I totally agree. That's noetic process, right? Like that's that's true Kabbalah. Like when you're doing it with your consciousness, not like you're not doing magic. You're just thinking through the correspondences. That's penetration of the Sephirah. That's exactly what it is. So that's I think that's what he's doing. It is like he's telling the truth, and that it's anthroposophy. It's like human wisdom, and he's taking you through a journey through the Sephirah. Now, whether you say it's the only way or the a valid way, I don't know, but I like it. So I think it's really important.
Interestingly, he said that the initiation into the various forms of mystery schools, that they don't work on the waking mind, but then when you go into the vegetative state of sleep, that it actually, those initiations work to purify your astral body on a higher level, much like he talks about how the astral body basically works at night to heal your vascular and nervous system. And when you're in that vegetative state, it's actually, working from a higher realm to heal the lower realm of your incorporated multifold energetic body, in spirit and in form.
That makes sense, right? Because everybody knows like Shiva. Abstar even brought it up. Like that's what Shiva is. When Shiva's light blue, turquoise, we just talked about this on the last show. But like when he's light blue and turquoise, he's sleeping. He's in sleeping consciousness. When he's lapis or dark blue or blue black, he is in waking or wrathful consciousness.
Right.
So it's exactly the same thing. He's like, it's like, where is your stage of consciousness, and what are you going to do with it?
Right. And he wants you to think about it. That's what he constantly talks about.
True gnosis.
Yes.
I think what you said, Robby, is perfect, because I never even heard of it like that. And you synthesized it perfectly. And that even religions, I'll even throw them in there. They focus more on the astral or the spiritual, the inner, the unconscious, or the non-conscious. Let's go.
Yeah.
And emphasize most of the work on that. And for me, I felt like Steiner focused on the consciousness. And what's interesting is that, going back to what Absterian was saying with Archangel Michael, is represented by the sun. If you think about it, you only see the sun during your waking time, and you are conscious throughout that, and to work on that side as well. And there's a lot of belief systems where most of human evolution came from the opening of the frontal lobe of the brain that was able to perceive more of the electromagnetic spectrum from the sun through retinal development, through a lot of the occipital parts of the brain and what have you. And so you start to think, okay, so it's not just biological, it's also metaphysical as well. Right. And I feel that was Steiner's attempt, whether it was good or bad, or whether it was messy or not. It was an attempt to bring it all together and try to, explain some of it as best they could at that point in time.
Yes,
that was incredible, Lisa. So let me just say that, but it makes sense. It makes complete sense. Like you can say that from the Kabbalistic perspective very easily. It's Hod rising. I mean, it doesn't capture it as beautifully as you said it, but
no.
It is interesting. It's the analytical mind perceiving the actual nature of reality, which is not just the numbers, not just the data. It's actually fundamentally more subtle, maybe empty. And as I always quote you, Lisa, and say this, is like emptiness is not nothingness. It's luminousness. So like the splendor of the worlds. And then it's also massless. meaning that it's, dancing or invisible or somewhere in the ether, maybe either wave. So yeah, that's a beautiful way to describe it.
Well, and kind of going back on what you were saying is that there's a lot of thought now talking about the sun and how if you can perceive more of the electromagnetic spectrum, the sun in your retina, you could potentially hear or see the messages of the sun. And when they talk about the sun, they say the sun is the sun. S-U-N is the S-O-N versus perceiving Christ consciousness through the sun itself. And when you think about it, you now start kind of flirting with quantum entanglement. You start flirting outside of yourself and perceiving that outer telepathy or, any kind of energy states that you can perceive someone or something else outside of you. And it starts to bring in that notion of what Nick has talked about. The consciousness is outside of you. It's not inside, it's outside. And that even vision is projected out potentially as well as seen in. So attempt to do that.
That makes total sense too, because the spark of Hod is the heart of Hesed. So you have to take the spark of light, the word, through the paths, and then make sure you go through Hesed, so you open perception, right? Yes. Like you're witnessing the sun in its fullness and what that is, which is really harmony and balance.
Yes, and I don't mean to keep going, but Absterian was saying, like with, he believes that the body's not a prison. I also agree. I feel like what you said, Jen, the spark is captured within mass. And that is quantum mechanics at its very essence. It's the ability for mass to be trapped into matter. And so when you talk about light, it's just this beam that's going nowhere. It's not chaos, it's just not contained. But at the moment of conception, it is contained. And at that moment, there's potentiality of all things. Right. I guess you could say.
Well, it's the light itself is a wave and a particle.
Correct.
So it's moving with ultimate potentiality, depending upon the perception of the individual, through the double slit experiment, showing that on some level we affect the actual creation of how reality forms. And we're like almost have a shared experiential, dream state of creative function holistically.
And it's proven so many times over and over and over again.
So funny you say that, Lisa, because my friend Sashki, who works on crystal quantum computing, like these very subjects, like exactly what we're talking about. And he is also like a student of Robert Anton Wilson. So he knows magic, like he understands, and he's a really good Kabbalist, like way better than me. But he talks about the non-locality of the pink ray, but he's talking about non-locality in the terms of quantum physics. But you can also use non-locality in the context of ontology and map making. So it's like there, and it's like exactly like what you're saying. It's like if Nick ever lets me do a show on the spectral ray or the pink ray, then maybe we'll talk about this more. But yeah, that's what the pink ray is. It's like it's the truth, but it's relative truth. It's in flux, aeon in flux. It's always dancing.
And the waveform of pink itself, it does have some qualities of red, but it doesn't actually exist. And it's only because of our mind that we create the idea of pink. At a previous point in history, it's believed that we created the idea of blue. So, as we're going, and Rudolf Steiner also talks about the point where we came to recognize the I within ourself, the individual, like, oh, I'm a singular person in a body of a soul force or like a species, and Steiner talks about the 4 soul force bodies that basically are the different animal bodies within Christian Science of the 4, the what is it, the bull and the eagle and the man and what's the other one? Anybody? but yeah, basically, and that those are, you know, the evolving soul forces that we're basically working with one another to bring ourselves to a higher state. You know,
Pink is the color of the crystal millennium. Like if you want like to look at that, what that looks like, it's like Google Sailor Moon, look up the Crystal Millennium Palace. It's almost the same idea. Yeah. And then obviously that idea is also found in the Bible as Nick we had that show with JT, and he talked about like the golden millennium kingdom. Well, the real Esoteric idea is a crystal millennium kingdom. So I thought that was really funny, but interesting as well, because it corresponds to the Steiner stuff a lot. It's like, it's pristine. It's like, that's so cool about pink is like, if you're looking at it, it's really like Quicksilver, like liquid Quicksilver. Yeah. That's really what it is.
Oh. That's interesting, because Thoth or Mercury, you get Quicksilver as well.
Quicksilver messenger service.
Isn't I'm almost positive, isn't like pink salmon Kabbalistically associated with Tiferet or something like that as a color?
Yes, sir. The pink occurs it's a middle pillar color. It occurs on every sephira of the middle pillar.
And isn't
at different densities.
Say that again?
Sorry, Lisa, say that again.
Isn't the middle pillar invisible?
Oh, yeah, technically,
at least in Masonic.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the lightning path, essentially.
Yeah, but it is only two pillars, but we do conclude that there's a third one there. But yeah, I mean that's
right.
So you can't technically, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Technically.
It's the middle.
Yeah, no, right.
Yeah, it's where the magic.
In relation
happens.
to pink, in relation to the pink beam.
It's very much like that because that's a higher density color. Like it happens at Kether, it happens at Tiferet, it happens at Dath, it happens at Yesod, but it's the highest density color. And it has different kind of there are different qualities of pink. I guess there's different, if you could say different colors of pink occur at the different sephira where pink occurs. So it's definitely like something that carries through all of like exactly what you said. Like if the pillar is invisible, or maybe it's not invisible, maybe we just don't know it's there until we acknowledge it, and then when we acknowledge it, we can say, okay.
Well, within art, when you're looking at art, one of the things that I frequently work with is the idea of negative space. So this when you create two lines, the nature of that function is creating the negative space that's in between, so you by having the two pillars, you are basically creating the unseen space that is there.
Totally, it's plus ultra,
right?
That reminds me of the book The Little Prince. What is unseen is essential.
That is a very magical book, actually. I've read it 1,000,000 times, both in English and French, and it's there's a reason why they give you that book in I don't know in the States, but in 8th grade they gave that to us, 8th grade French, and they were like, read this. And now looking back, it's definitely magical. It's very Kabbalistic. It's Rosicrucian. I mean,
it has a rose.
That's right.
It has a rose.
That is interesting. That is another thing I did want to say before we do wrap it up. I mean, I'm not saying we have to, but since you brought up the rose again and Rosicrucianism, I sometimes often think that the OTO is actually a Rosicrucian order. Actually.
Yeah. I mean, I've been digging deep into Rosicrucianism lately, and you have these various forces behind setting up other forces, and you can just go back from certain groups to the Rosicrucians to the Jesuits to the Illuminato. I mean, and it's just this continuing circulating of these subculture kind of ideas within powerful institutions.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you. I think Nick has a great point. The OTO definitely they've contained so much stuff. Like it's actually really interesting now. Like I used to find it like so old manish. No offense, but I don't know. Like because even Zoomers tease me about like the chaos magic stuff that I like. They're saying, "Oh, that's old Troon stuff" or whatever. But the reality is like it does contain the ideas. So it's just about like using your discernment to figure out what's a lie and what is the real way. It's like how they always modify like all the lesser banishing pentagram and all the other ones, all the rituals, they always modify them. And sometimes they're bullshitting you and sort of leading you off path. And sometimes they're telling you the truth. And it's like, which one is right? They do the same thing in Tantra. So
it's not old, it's retro.
That's true.
I agree.
I like that one. Go with that one. All right. I think we'll wrap it up here if everybody's all right. Absidarian, thank you very much again, sir. I really appreciate all your time and all the stuff you brought to the show. You want to let everybody know where they can find your stuff again, please? If you
want. Sure. This was a great dialogue, everyone. We really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm on Linktree, Absidarian across social media networks. I just want to conclude with a little curveball and a little teaser to help look at Steiner, and maybe you got to look at him in a different way. So this comes from Sam Robinson, who is the author of Alois Mylander, the biography. He's about to publish the second part of the biography, where he's going to focus on, if I remember correctly, the influence on Mylander's students. So I'm not 100% sure that Steiner's was initiated by Mylander. Maybe he was influenced by Mylander's students, but this was a little curveball comment and a little teaser from Sam, and getting us ready for the next book where he'll speak about Steiner. So he's basically saying, he talks about, the Max Heindel diagram 17 of the unused sex currents is 3 images, a very popular esoteric image. Well, anyway, that came from Steiner, but it's important to remember that Steiner shared things for different things for different audiences. So he never shared that with the public. But essentially, the curveball is Sam's presenting information that Steiner and Heindel's methods did not represent Rosicrucian teachings of Alois Mylander, but rather Steiner was represented Grail teachings. So that I thought that was a very interesting curveball. So I'm looking forward to that book and diving into that. So that was a big curveball. That's it with the conclusion.
Awesome.
Has hints of Melchizedek.
The fire, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Was there anything else you wanted to plug for yourself? Like that was it?
Yeah, that's it. Linktree.
Awesome.
Absidarian across social media networks, Patreon, Esoteric Research. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's really awesome. Every show.
Yes. And Robby Marx, real quick, you want to remind everybody where they can find your amazing work?
Yes, I am Robby Marx, and you can check out all my stuff, my artwork, my podcasts, all my miscellaneous social media at Linktree, RMARX, and that'll get everything for you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Frater, please let everybody know where they can find the ninja.
Thank you so much, Cardinal. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. I'll just use it like this. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Robby. Thank you, Absidarian. And, of course, thank you, Nick, Mr. 93, for including me on this series. It's actually been incredibly fun. Absidarian, whenever I've worked with him, it's been amazing. So thank you, guys. Appreciate it. And, yeah, if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter, Wukong Reborn, or the show Threshold Saints. And, yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Ethan Indigo.
That was some great lessons from all of you guys. Thank you, Absidarian. Always insightful. I really appreciate you. And I'm on all the social media, easy to find. No fake Ethan Indigos out there yet. So salute. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. No, thank you. And Lisa, glad you finally was able to make it. Always appreciate you joining us. So
me too. This was the best lecture setting ever. I very much enjoy all of the episodes on the Occult Rejects because I learned way more than I learn anywhere else. And it has been a pleasure. Thank you, Abstarian. I learned so much from today. And Robby, Jen, and Ethan, so much as well. So thank you. And just a quick plug, occultresearchinstitute.org.
Awesome. Thank you again. I really appreciate that. And that is it. That is the end of another Occult Rejects. Until the next one, everybody be well. Later.